Lira Onyx vanished without a trace. Arlo Vesic went searching for her and was never seen again. Keira Mahlon uncovered what they left behind, and now she is missing too. What started as a single disappearance unraveled into a chilling web of secrets buried beneath Gallo Ridge, where red X's mark more than just forgotten places. They mark the lost. Lira Onyx was not a typical traveler. She wasn't interested in beaches or tourist landmarks. Instead, she was drawn to the eerie, the forgotten, the places that time had swallowed. Her social media was filled with haunting images of collapsed barns, rusted railway tracks, and crumbling walls covered in vines. At 33, she had gained a cult following for her work. Followers often described her photographs as silent screams, and her latest project focused on ghost towns that had vanished off the map. She arrived in the quiet town of Rivenmore with little fanfare, checking into a small lakeside inn under her real name. The innkeeper later described her as polite but distant, always returning late, her boots muddy, her eyes scanning the trees. The inn was small, only 6 rooms, and Lira was the only guest that week. She stayed in room 4, the one overlooking the lake, and spent most of her time exploring the nearby woods. Locals remembered seeing her at the bakery once, asking if anyone knew stories about abandoned towns or old mines. The older residents shrugged her off, but one man who ran the local canoe rental pointed her toward a rarely used trail leading into the national forest. That trail hadn't been cleared in years, he told her, and ended somewhere near the cliffs of Gallo Ridge. 2 days later, Lira was gone. The innkeeper knocked on her door when she didn't come down for breakfast, but there was no answer. The room was unlocked. Inside, her clothes were folded on the chair. The bed was made, but her backpack and camera were missing. Her phone lay charging beside the bed, untouched since the night before. The car she had rented was gone, and the innkeeper assumed she had simply gone out early for a shoot. But by nightfall, when she hadn't returned, concern began to grow. Her brother, Arlo Onyx, who lived in another state, called the inn after failing to reach her for 2 days. He was alarmed to learn that no one had seen or heard from her. Local police were contacted, and soon a search was underway. They checked her rental agreement, traced the car's GPS, and discovered it had last pinged at a gas station nearly 40 miles away. Security footage from the station showed Lira refueling late at night, wearing a thick coat, her hair in a loose bun, and a camera bag slung across her back. She looked tired, maybe even anxious, constantly glancing over her shoulder. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. What baffled investigators was what they found next. Her rental car was discovered parked on a dirt path leading into the forest near Gallo Ridge, keys still in the ignition. Inside were her jacket, an unopened bottle of water, and a note that read simply, "Don't follow." The handwriting matched hers. The area was searched extensively by both police and volunteers, but the thick woods and steep terrain made the effort difficult. Sniffer dogs lost her scent less than half a mile in. A few days later, hikers found her camera inside a rest stop. Bathroom on the edge of the highway, nearly 60 miles from where her car had been left. The memory card was missing. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing but a few faint scuff marks on the sink, and a single muddy footprint in the corner. Forensics revealed nothing of value. It was as if she had vanished piece by piece, her belongings scattered like breadcrumbs across the region. A local man claimed he saw a woman matching her description walking barefoot along the edge of a ravine 3 nights after she was last seen. He said she looked lost, dazed, and walked as if she didn't know where she was. Authorities searched that area too, but no trace of Lira could be found. The story made regional news, then quickly faded as new cases filled the headlines. But those who had met her, even briefly, couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened to Lira Onyx wasn't random, and it wasn't over. The forest she entered has a long history of secrets, and Lira, with her obsession for the forgotten, may have uncovered something that was meant to stay buried. Weeks passed without a single clue. Then, during a routine aerial scan for wildfires, a forestry drone picked up signs of an old structure, deep within the dense trees, far beyond any marked trails. The images revealed the charred remains of a small wooden cabin, blackened and collapsed, hidden beneath the thick canopy. The location was over 12 miles from the nearest road. Authorities were dispatched immediately, suspecting a possible connection to Lira Onyx's disappearance. The sight was unnerving. The cabin had clearly burned down months ago, yet no official reports of fire in the area had been filed. Investigators found a half-melted camera lens in the ashes, fragments of a tripod, and a scorched travel journal with partially legible entries. Though no body was discovered, the items matched the gear Lira was known to carry. The area around the cabin was littered with strange debris, pieces of old radios, broken tools, and fragments of photographs half buried in the soil. More disturbing was what wasn't found. No signs of food supplies, no sleeping bags or furniture, and no identifying documents. Whoever had lived there had either fled before the fire or had carefully removed all traces of themselves. But someone had definitely been there, and recently. A makeshift clothesline still hung between two trees, one end burnt away. Near the tree line, investigators discovered a half-buried metal bucket filled with water bottles, most unopened and stamped with expiration dates from just 6 months earlier. Detectives started canvassing local areas for anyone who may have known about the cabin. In a nearby gas station, surveillance footage revealed a man stopping to buy fuel 2 days before Lira vanished. The footage was grainy, but his coat was tattered and his face obscured by a large hood. He used cash, never looked at the camera, and left no trace. No vehicle license plate was visible. Facial recognition software returned no matches. No fingerprints were found on the gas pump, and the transaction was untraceable. No one who worked at the station remembered the man. With no ID, no digital history, and no witnesses, the investigators began referring to him as the man with no records. Further investigation led to a chilling realization. This was not the first time he had been seen. Local hikers and campers had reported sightings of a similar figure in the forest over the years. Always alone, always silent, always vanishing before anyone could get close. They spoke of a man who seemed out of place, wearing outdated clothing, watching from a distance. Most dismissed it as folklore, a forest myth. But now, with Lira missing and the destroyed cabin, those old stories began to feel all too real. Forensics analysts returned with another eerie finding. The burnt pages from the travel journal revealed a few cryptic sentences written in Lira's handwriting. One entry read, "I followed him to the ridge. He knew I was there." Another said, "He's not trying to hide. He wants me to see it." There was no indication of what it was. These brief lines raised more questions than answers. The investigation took another strange turn when the forest rangers revealed that the land where the cabin stood was never listed in public records. It wasn't marked as state property, private property, or federal land. It simply didn't exist in any official database. Old paper maps from the 1970s showed a symbol there, a red X with no explanation. Modern satellite data showed nothing but trees. Speculation began to swirl. Some believed Lira had found a hidden outpost, something left over from a secret program or an illegal operation. Others believed she had stumbled upon the lair of someone who had been living undetected for decades. The man with no records was no ordinary person. He had erased himself from every system, and now it seemed he had taken Lira with him. Or worse. Despite the pressure and media attention, the investigation stalled. Leads grew cold. The cabin was sealed off, the remains catalogued, and Lira's case quietly shifted from active to pending. But for the officers who had walked through those ashes and seen the look in Lira's eyes on that gas station tape, one thing was clear. They were dealing with something far more calculated than a simple disappearance, and the man without a past was still out there, watching. The search team returned to the burnt cabin with renewed focus. Though much of the structure had collapsed, a narrow opening beneath the remains of the floor was discovered after rainfall caused part of the ground to sink. What appeared to be a small crawl space revealed something startling: a rusted trapdoor, hidden under layers of ash and debris. When it was pried open, investigators found a steel lockbox sealed tight and a bundle of old paper maps wrapped in a rotted cloth. The lockbox was taken in for examination, while the maps were carefully unfolded at the scene. The maps were unlike anything standard. They were hand-drawn, yellowed with age, and marked with red ink in patterns that formed strange, spiraling paths through the forests and hills surrounding Gallow Ridge. Each map had dates written in the corners, going back decades. But the most alarming detail was the red X marks scattered across them, many accompanied by initials or single names. Some of those names matched individuals from cold missing persons cases, some dating back over 30 years. One map, marked 1996, had 5 red X's clustered near a cave system that had been sealed off after a reported mining collapse that same year. That mine had long been dismissed as irrelevant, but now it seemed it might hold secrets buried deeper than stone. Back. At the forensic lab, the steel lockbox was forced open. Inside was a flash drive, a faded photograph of a woman standing in front of an old well, and what appeared to be fragments of human hair wrapped in gauze. The photograph matched the appearance of Lira Onyx, but she was wearing clothing that none of her acquaintances recognized. Analysts rushed to recover data from the flash drive, which was partially corrupted. Most folders were encrypted, protected by complex keys that even law enforcement software struggled to crack. But one folder, left oddly unprotected, contained a single video file. The video was just under 2 minutes long. It showed a dimly lit space, a concrete room, possibly underground, with rusted shelves holding bones, worn leather books, and jars filled with unknown substances. The camera panned slowly, and Lyra's voice could be heard in a hushed whisper. Her words were chilling. "I think I found the truth. It's deeper than I imagined. This place was never empty." The video ended abruptly with a static burst, followed by muffled scraping sounds and a final moment of darkness. The room in the video didn't match any structure known in the region, but a few investigators noted that the stonework looked consistent with early 20th century mining tunnels. These tunnels were rumored to stretch beneath several forested areas, including locations marked on the maps recovered from the cabin. Some of the passages had supposedly been sealed after numerous accidents, collapses, and even mysterious disappearances of workers. Yet, these documents now suggested that at least some of those tunnels had remained open, and possibly used for something else entirely. Police contacted historians, geologists, and retired mine workers to understand the full scope of the underground systems. One retired engineer vaguely recalled rumors of unauthorized work being conducted after hours in the 1980s, work that was never officially recorded. He mentioned one tunnel, nicknamed the Red Vein, that had been sealed off after 5 hikers vanished in 1996. Their bodies were never recovered, and the cave was closed permanently after a partial collapse. That location, investigators realized, corresponded exactly with one of the red X's on the maps found under the cabin. Questions began piling up. Why would someone live off-grid near these forgotten tunnels? What was Lira really filming before she disappeared? And how did a flash drive, hidden beneath the floor of a burnt cabin, end up containing footage that suggested the presence of an underground chamber, one possibly tied to decades of disappearances? The mystery had evolved far beyond a missing persons case. Lira Onyx had not only disappeared, she had potentially uncovered a truth that someone had tried very hard to erase. And now, with these new discoveries, it was becoming clear that she may not have been the first to stumble upon it. Nor would she be the last. the investigation took a darker turn just as momentum was building. Arlo Vesic, the lead detective overseeing the Onyx case, was known for his calm approach and sharp instincts. He had spent nearly 2 decades solving missing person cases, many of which had been considered hopeless. But this one was different. From the moment he reviewed the footage of Lira's final video, he became consumed. He studied the old maps for hours, cross-referencing them with archived mining reports, weather patterns, and even folklore passed down by local forest rangers. Something about the case seemed deliberately concealed, as if someone, or something, was ensuring that certain places remained forgotten. Then, without warning, Arlo vanished. He had left his home early one morning, telling his colleague he was going to follow up on something important. He never returned. His phone stopped pinging hours later, and by evening, his vehicle was reported abandoned by a hiker near the entrance of the sealed mines. The discovery of his car sent a ripple of panic through the team. The vehicle was parked neatly by the edge of a gravel road, facing the forest. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. Inside, the ignition was off, and the key was tucked inside the glove compartment. On the passenger seat sat Arlo's leather-bound case journal, open to a single page. In hurried, uneven handwriting, he had written, "It's not abandoned." Next to that was a faint smudge of blood. The rest of the journal contained only blank pages. A multi-agency search was launched immediately. Drones, rescue dogs, and ground teams combed the area for days. They found no trace of Arlo, not a piece of clothing, not a footprint. It was as if he had stepped out of his car and dissolved into the wilderness. Officers widened the search radius, retracing every lead he had followed in the days prior to his disappearance. Eventually, they returned to the cave systems marked on the maps, with a particular focus on the area known as the Red Vein. That part of the forest had always had a strange reputation. Park rangers reported that compasses often malfunctioned there, wildlife avoided it, and hikers frequently complained of headaches, disorientation, and strange sounds underground. The sealed mine entrance was heavily reinforced with concrete, slabs, and warning signs, but behind it was a tunnel known to extend for miles beneath the surface. Arlo's last recorded GPS location placed him less than 300 feet from that entrance. 10 days after his disappearance, a grim discovery was made. A park ranger, checking old fire break paths in a nearby area, stumbled upon a hollowed tree trunk, stuffed with a filthy duffel bag. Inside were several items: Arlo's badge, his personal compass snapped in half, a blood-stained cloth, and a delicate silver necklace later confirmed to belong to Lira Onyx. Even more disturbing was a small notebook, tucked into the side pouch of the bag. It wasn't Arlo's usual journal. The cover was torn, and many pages were soaked through, but some remained legible. They contained erratic entries, paranoid scribbles, and repeated mentions of someone referred to only as the Whisperer. One line stood out from the rest. "They come when it's silent. That's when you see the real doors." Officials refused to release the full contents of the notebook to the public, but internal sources hinted that it described underground, locations that didn't appear on any geological survey. More red X's, more names. Some pages were filled with shapes and symbols, drawn over and over again, as if Arlo had become obsessed. Despite the growing evidence that something unnatural was unfolding beneath Gallo Ridge, funding for the case was quietly reduced. The site was declared hazardous, and all entries into the old mines were officially banned. No further searches were conducted. For the team left behind, the sense of unease never lifted. Lira had vanished chasing secrets. Arlo had disappeared chasing her. Now the question lingered. How many others had been drawn in, only to vanish? Without a trace? And more terrifying, what exactly was waiting in the silence underground? Months passed, and the case of Lira Onyx and Detective Arlo Vesic quietly slipped from the headlines. Public interest faded, but among a select few, those who had worked the case, those who had lost sleep over it, the mystery continued to haunt. The investigation had left behind more questions than answers, and though officially labeled as unsolved, those closest to the case believed something far more sinister had taken place than what was written in reports. One of those people was Keira Mahlon, a forensic cartographer brought in to analyze the hand-drawn maps found beneath the cabin. Keira had seen strange things before, maps marked with untraceable trails, zones that didn't align with any official data. But nothing like this. The red X's weren't just arbitrary markers. When Keira layered the maps over satellite images and topographic data, something terrifying emerged. The locations of the X's formed patterns. Perfect geometric shapes, circles, triangles, and even spirals that mirrored symbols found in ancient manuscripts. These patterns crossed state lines and reappeared in other missing persons cases dating back nearly a century. Keira's obsession grew. She spent weeks tracing names and initials found on the maps, cross-referencing them with archived missing persons records. An alarming number matched real people, individuals who had vanished in remote regions with no witnesses, no suspects, and no bodies ever found. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. Someone had been tracking these people, long before law enforcement had ever noticed they were missing. The symbols weren't just random. They were connected to places people disappeared and never returned. Then one morning, Keira received an unmarked package at her apartment. Inside was an old, warped VHS tape and a short note. "Play this. Somewhere safe. Don't be alone." The handwriting was jagged, and the paper smelled faintly of mold and smoke. Keira didn't tell anyone. She set up a borrowed VHS player in her office and pressed play. The footage was grainy, filmed in low light, showing what appeared to be a narrow tunnel deep underground. The camera moved unsteadily, as if the person holding it was panicking. Faint breathing could be heard, and somewhere in the distance, a low, rhythmic sound echoed, like stone grinding against stone. The tunnel walls were lined with old mining beams, but they were splintered, broken, as if something massive had passed through. The last 10 seconds of the tape showed a figure at the end of the tunnel. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, tall and still, its face completely covered by a mask made of what looked like bark and rope. The tape ended with static. Terrified, Keira turned everything over to authorities. The tape was reviewed, studied, and eventually classified. No official report was filed. That same week, Keira left town without warning. Her apartment was found empty, her phone powered off, and her email auto-reply simply read, "I was wrong. It's not over." With no new leads, the case files were archived. But behind closed doors, those who had worked the investigation quietly shared a theory. Lira hadn't vanished by accident. She had stumbled onto something ancient and organized. A system hidden in the forgotten corners of the world. One that didn't leave traces unless it wanted to. The man in the gas station, the burned cabin, the underground room in the video, none of it was random. It was part of a pattern that stretched back far longer than anyone imagined. Years later, hikers occasionally report strange symbols carved into tree trunks deep in the Gallo Ridge forest. Some claim to hear faint whispering when the wind dies. Others speak of a tall figure in the distance, always watching, never moving. Most people dismiss these stories as nothing more than myth. But those who know the truth, those who remember the red X's and the names attached to them, stay far away. Because they understand now what Lira Onyx discovered too late. Some places were never meant to be found, and some secrets are buried for a reason.